Hey, y'all. So we're now at the peace process, and this is going to happen at the Paris Peace Conference. A little fun fact: Woodrow Wilson's the first sitting president to ever leave the country, and there was actually kind of a controversial scare there. What would happen? But really, there was no real understanding of that new technology. Because clearly, the president could be in France and still handle day-to-day affairs in America via the phone. But again, there was some interesting stuff. If you wanted to delve into that, you can. But now we're going to look at the actual peace conference. As the big four converge in Paris, there's this big romantic hope that they're going to create a peace that will last forever. They're almost looking at maybe they're thinking they're the Congress of Vienna. But again, a significant difference between this Congress of Vienna and the Paris Peace Conference is going to be mass politics, right? Yes, their public opinion was a concern for the Congress of Vienna of 1815, but for the Paris Peace Conference, it determines everything. So you may want to write that down. That's an interesting comparison there. But now, as they converge, how did the big four turn into the big three? Because I know some of you guys who read McKay is like, I didn't even know there was a big four. Well, the big four included Italy. You see this guy to the right, Orlando. He comes in really excited that they're on the winning side. He believes he's going to gain everything that was promised in that secret Treaty of London of 1915. So there's a sense like, hey, we are going to reimagine Italy. We're not just made Italy, we have now made Italians. We went through the social Darwinist war. We've been out this grinder. We are now forged. This is a great moment. Not only are we going to get Tyrol that has Italian speaking people, but we're going to get all the way down to Dalmatia. Well, unfortunately, this is where Woodrow Wilson says, oh, no, you don't. Go back to the 14 points if you haven't read them yet. One of the points specifically is directed at Italy. You will get Italian land. Well, I think Orlando was like, he's thinking historic Roman land. No, no, no. It's Italian land, Italian speaking land. So Woodrow Wilson refused to give him any land outside of Italian speaking. So that whole land along the Dalmatia, which is the Adriatic coastline on the Balkans, he refuses to allow that because those are Slavic peoples who deserve to be in a Slavic country. So now this pseudo goal of self determination is really going forward. Orlando realized he is devastated because now he's going to go home with only half the land that he was promised. And that meant the Italians are going to feel half as great, which again, he's not wrong. He understood that the public opinion was going to turn against this government. And it did. By 1922, what we know as the Republic of Italy will no longer exist, primarily because of this moment. I think that's something we're going to evaluate a little bit later. But as the big three converge, really it's Clemenceau versus Wilson. Clemenceau and Wilson, I believe they liked each other personally, but what we see is Clemenceau's political reality, the real politic, if you will, borrowing it from Bismarck, with Wilsonian idealism. Clemenceau needed revenge. He needed defense. Parts of Clemenceau's goals was to regain Alsace-Lorraine, gain reparations for the devastation this war had on France, and also divide Germany. He was hoping of dividing Germany into two, in a buffer Rhine state, divide that German population, because Germany had the biggest population with the biggest GDP with most infrastructure. As long as it remained together, they would hold hegemony over Europe. And so France, Clemenceau is like, hey, we really need to divide this. Well, Wilsonian idealism based on self-determination says, heck no, we need to keep Germany together because that is the right way to go. So all of a sudden we have this coursing conflict. How are we going to compromise? Originally, this was planned to be one of several peace conferences. This is where they were going to hash out the principles, and then there would be other conferences of other diplomats, lower diplomats, that would be able to hash out the individual details. That romantic hope comes to an end because of this key thing: the fear of Bolshevism, the fear of revolution. Think about the lack of integrity of Eastern Europe. Russia is gone. There's no longer that element. They have a Bolshevik government. Germany is in chaos with the second revolution. Austria-Hungary no longer exists. So that whole eastern area, Balkan Peninsula, is one ginormous power vacuum. And in Hungary, Bela Kun, actually a communist, is going to seize power there. So this is fear that there is a wave of Bolshevism, workers of the world unite mentality, that's really going to determine this outcome. So instead of a long process of trying to figure things out, we're going to have a series of quick compromises between realism and idealism. And unfortunately, that's not going to work out very well. With the Treaty of Versailles or the Peace of Versailles, what we see is it's a sign in the Hall of Mirrors on June 28, 1919. Once again, guys, we talked about the 11th hour, the 11th day, the 11th month, all that stuff, and this kind of trying to create a romantic end. But now we end at the June 28th. It marked the fifth anniversary of the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, a quote unquote perfect ending to this war. So this is such a moment in which we're trying to memorialize this great victory over Germany. Germany is not going to really respect this peace. And again, just really interesting elements. Plus, it's done in the Hall of Mirrors. What else was done in the Hall of Mirrors? Of course, the crown of the Kaiser. So all of this is going to be wrapped up into this revanchism. I might be overstating it. That's up to you for to ponder, to go research. But what were the key provisions? I want to point the demilitarization of the Rhineland. This area here, this area that I'm pointing to, this area will remain part of Germany, but all French military has to be stripped. This is where that neutrality zone, this area here, will not be able to be fortified. Very significant. They lost their military. Not only do they have to give up the navy, but they have to give up their great Prussian military history. I think that's going to be one of the elements. They can only have a military force. I believe the number was 100,000, which means it's basically a police force, a national guard, if you will. They're going to lose their military prowess, which, again, very important to that psyche. The territorial losses, they're going to lose Alsace and Lorraine. They're going to lose as well as the Polish corridor. The Polish corridor is going to separate East Prussia from the rest of Germany. So this is Germany, and that's Germany. You better make sure you know that when you shade this on the map, this is not just Germany. It's this part too, and this Polish corridor. And the people that live here speak German. They believe they're German, but now they're part of Poland. And the reason Wilson really pushed this is so that Poland would have access to the sea, because great countries need great navies. So we see that element. And then something that the Germans could really not grasp is this Article 231, the War Guilt Clause. It is a statement that all of the war was caused by Germany alone. So this is going to discount anything French revanchism. It's going to discount the Russians' full mobilization. It's going to discount the formation of the Entente, the Triple Entente that triangulated Germany. It's really going to reject almost all things, and then that becomes the War Guilt Clause becomes the justification for this undetermined amount of reparations. So by the time the Germans sign this, there's going to be a kind of a revision of history here in Germany. We'll talk more about that later, but let's unfold this. Was a Treaty of Versailles too harsh? I know your eighth grade history teachers said, oh, this is the worst treaty ever. You treated Germany so badly. So I'm going to go into the first counter to that. Clearly, it's not as devastating. No. Why? First, let's compare it to the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Germany has just devastated Russia, stripped away a third of their land, stripped away reparations gold. So for Germany to say, oh, we're victims and we're devastated, Russia loses significantly more because of the German treaty. So again, they don't have moral standing on this. Their taxes can easily pay the annual reparation bill. So in this sense, all they have to do is raise their taxes. From understand, my professor when I was an undergrad in college talked about it was between 1% to 2% of the German GDP. So clearly this could have been paid. And if you think about the devastation in which Germany caused when they violated Belgium, the neutrality, and they attacked France. They were the aggressors on the Western Front. Almost all of this war happens in a devastated Belgium and France with significant infrastructure loss for both countries. So now all of us, and remember, no battles occurred on German soil. So now all of a sudden we begin to see, yeah, okay, that makes more sense. But on the flip side, so I've given you some elements that now it seems to be kind of normal. Number one, no German representative at this peace conference, which as a historian, I'm going to tell you this is probably the worst thing possible if we want to compare it to uh, the conference, the Vienna Conference, Congress of Vienna of 1850. And remember, Talleyrand not only was present for France, he played a significant role in the peace process, maintaining some integrity. Well, without any German representative here, again, the German representative would have had to accept this peace, but they would have at least had a presence, but they weren't there. So it's going to allow for a big lie of the quote unquote dictated peace. Diktat is going to be the German word here. I probably don't say it perfectly correct, but it's going to be the German version of revanchism, that this is a dictated peace. They're going to actually believe they won the battle on the war on the battlefront. And what we see here, we see a political cartoon. Really like this cartoon because it's the way that Germans felt. It's going to be the way anti-war people felt. What we see here is this peace is we're going to force it into them like a medicine that a child is going to take. Really devastating. But before I step off this slide, I really want to emphasize one of my favorite books I've read about this, and a couple other wars. It's Dr. Kagan's on causes of war and preservation of peace. Really solid work there. If you do any research in wars, could be a good starting point for you to research. But he argues the peace was neither too harsh nor harsh enough. If it was too harsh, Germany would have been destroyed. They would have been two separate states. They would have been devastated economically. There would have been no way for them to gain revenge. Well, that's not true. It wasn't harsh, and it wasn't harsh enough, which means in the idea here is it wasn't a peace without victor. So it's this lukewarm crap that Dr. Kagan unfolds that you're like, oh, all of a sudden you begin to realize the Wilsonian idealism and clemency's demand for revenge. It doesn't quite gel. And that's going to lead us to why did Wilson really fail? Because he failed almost every single element. Well, first, his 14 points were introduced years after the war began. The United States, we are not introducing these morals at the ideals at the beginning of the war. You already know that we were not really neutral as we respected the British blockade, protested the unrestricted submarine warfare. We were actively training with the Entente powers, so we weren't neutral. And we could have been part of this early negotiation, but instead Wilson says we're moral, we're on a moral high horse, we're so awesome. Well, that doesn't reflect the reality of the war. His idealism did not reflect the harsh reality of the European mass politics and damages that developed during this war. When we look at this, David Lloyd George's 1918 campaign promises, the Liberal Party won the election based on the idea that Germany would pay for the war costs, because Great Britain didn't want to be involved in this war, according to them in 1918. And again, there's some revisionism there, but the idea is that they were compelled to join because of Belgian neutrality. So they should be able to. That Germans should pay for the soldiers and the soldier costs. Clemenceau, his desire to punish and weaken Germany. This, again, mass politics, revanchism, the 44 years of this, it's going to have to come to a reality. So literally, Wilson surrendered each of his points, 13 of the 14 points he's going to have to compromise on. It's not going to be self-determination for all countries. I mean, you have Czechoslovakia. You're going to have a country of Czechs, Slovaks, a group of small Germans, a couple other ethnic groups. You have Yugoslavia, which is a conglomeration of several Slavic groups. So now all of a sudden we don't have self-determination. We don't have elements. We don't have a peace without victor. We don't have all these nice, pretty things. Well, the only thing he gained was the League of Nations. He was willing to sacrifice 13 of his points because he believed the League of Nations would fix everything. So that is a key component of the Peace of Versailles. Unfortunately, his refusal to bring a Republican leader of the Senate to Paris to help negotiate, to give insight, to warrant some discussion, it led to the Senate rejecting both Versailles and the League of Nations. So the United States, though we signed this treaty in 1918 or 1990, excuse me, it doesn't become law in the United States, and we're going to have to renegotiate the end of this in a separate treaty that will not have the League of Nations. This was an attack. This was a Republican attack on Wilsonian idealism. Wilson idealism was trying to make the United States the police officer of the world, and Republican isolationism led us to this point. And I love this political cartoon. If you want to pause and study it, you can. But what we see here is we see the title here. This League of Nations bridge was designed by the President of the United States. It's like a little construction site. We have Belgium, France, England, and Italy, but we have a gap here, and there's a gap. And who's the gap? It's Uncle Sam using the United States as a pillow what's going to happen to this bridge without its keystone? It's going to collapse. This 1919 cartoon really was utilized to demonstrate bad things were about to happen, that the United States withdrawal is going to create chaos. And in the end, Woodrow Wilson's romantic hope with a peace without victor and a peace that would last forever failed because his idealism, his refusal to negotiate, and his refusal to see political reality. And with that said, we're going to pause here. There's one or two more lecture parts of this, but we're going to stop here.